I never thought a single text message could change the rhythm of my life, but that's how it started. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon, the kind where the sky sagged heavy and gray over Seoul, and every corner cafe smelled of freshly ground coffee and pastries. My best friend, Ji-hai, had cornered me into something I swore I wasn't ready for. You're 23, Min-jun. You can't just bury yourself in books and part-time shifts forever. You need someone. Her words stung not because they were untrue but because they were too true. She knew how fragile I was, how easily I flinched when people raised their voices, how quickly my hands shook when I got nervous. Being in Omega had always felt like being branded delicate, like the world expected me to fold before it even tried to break me. But Ji-hai didn't take no for an answer. By the time I realized what she'd done, she had already sent my profile to an exclusive blind date service for Omegas and Alphas. Trust me, she said, grinning as she shoved her phone under my nose. This could be the beginning of your forever. And if not, at least you'll get a free dinner out of it. So there I was, sitting in a tiny cafe in Gangnam, fingers fidgeting with the edge of my glass of iced latte, staring at the condensation rolling down like tiny rivers. My reflection in the glass door opposite me looked pale, almost sickly. I'd spent an embarrassing amount of time choosing my outfit. A crisp white button-up shirt, light beige trousers, and shoes I hadn't worn since college graduation. I even styled my hair, though my bangs kept falling into my eyes no matter how many times I pushed them back. The cafe smelled of caramel and roasted beans. Around me, conversations floated in the air, two university students giggling over their laptops, an elderly couple sharing a slice of strawberry cake, a group of office workers loudly debating football. But all of it felt distant, muted, as though the world itself was holding its breath with me. And then he walked in. Sungwoo. I didn't know his name yet, but the moment the door chimed and he stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. People looked up, not obviously but subtly, like his presence demanded attention even without him asking for it. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp lines that looked like they'd been carved by a sculptor. His black suit was fitted perfectly, the kind you see in magazines or dramas, and his dark hair was swept neatly back, not a strand out of place. When his eyes found mine across the cafe, my breath caught. His gaze was intense, almost piercing, like he could see right through me. He approached with measured steps, each one exuding confidence. And when he finally stood in front of my table, I felt small, fragile, like the Omega label society gave me had suddenly become a cage around my ribs. Min-jun. His voice was deep, smooth, with the faintest trace of authority that made my chest tighten. I scrambled to my feet, bowing slightly. Why yes, that's me. My voice cracked and I cursed myself for it. He smiled faintly, not wide but enough to reveal perfect teeth. I'm Sungwoo. I nodded too quickly and in my rush, I nearly tipped over my drink. The glass wobbled dangerously, but before I could panic, his hand shot out and steadied it with impeccable reflexes. His fingers brushed against mine, warm, steady, controlled. Careful, he said, his lips curving in amusement. Heat flared in my cheeks. Sorry? I can be clumsy. He slid into the seat opposite me with the kind of ease that made it seem like he belonged there, like he belonged everywhere. The chair didn't squeak, his suit didn't wrinkle, his movements were fluid and confident in a way that made me painfully aware of my own awkwardness. For the next hour we talked. Or rather, I tried to talk while he carried the conversation effortlessly. What do you do? He asked, sipping his black coffee as though bitterness didn't faze him. I work part-time at a bookstore, I admitted, staring at my fingers wrapped around the glass. And I'm studying literature at the university. Literature. He raised a brow, leaning back. So, you like stories? I nodded, smiling nervously. They make me feel less alone. His eyes lingered on me for a moment too long and I felt my pulse quicken. I couldn't tell if he was judging me or trying to figure me out. I don't usually do blind dates, he said after a pause, swirling the coffee in his cup. But when I saw your profile, something told me to come. My chest warmed at the words. No one had ever said something like that to me before. The more we spoke, the more I convinced myself that this was what fate must feel like. He was refined, confident, someone who could hold the world in his hands. And me? I was just an Omega who'd never had someone look at me like I mattered. When the date ended, he insisted on walking me home. The evening air was cool, the city lights glimmering like stars that had descended to earth. My hands trembled the entire way, my mind replaying every smile, every glance he had given me. At my apartment entrance, I fumbled with my keys, unsure how to end the night. Should I thank him? Wow. Offer a handshake? My heart hammered with indecision. But Sungwoo made the choice for me. Without asking, without hesitation, he stepped closer and pressed his lips against mine. It wasn't gentle, but it wasn't cruel either. Firm. Certain. His hand cupped the back of my neck, tilting me just enough to deepen the kiss. My knees nearly gave out and I had to grip the strap of my bag to keep myself upright. When he pulled back, his breath was warm against my lips. "I'll call you," he said simply, as though it were a promise etched in stone. And then he walked away, leaving me frozen at the door, my heart pounding so hard I thought the neighbors would hear it. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my lips still tingling from his kiss, I whispered to myself, "This is it, Minjun. You finally found it. The love you've always been waiting for. If only I had known then how wrong I was." When people talk about relationships, they often mention a honeymoon phase. Those first few weeks or months where everything feels like a dream, where you can't imagine the person beside you doing anything wrong. That's where I thought I was with Sung-woo. He texted me every morning. "Good morning, Minjun. Did you sleep well?" He called every night. "Have you eaten? Don't forget your vitamins." He took me to restaurants I could never afford on my own, ordered wine I couldn't even pronounce, and held my hand like it was something precious. When we walked together, I felt safe, shielded by his height, his presence, the way others glanced at him with respect, even envy. It was the first time in my life I felt chosen. But love, I would learn, has shadows. It started small. One evening, Sung-woo was preparing for an important client meeting. He had laid out a dark navy suit, freshly dry cleaned, and asked me to iron a crisp white shirt to go with it. I tried my best. Truly I did. But when I set the shirt neatly on the hanger, I realized too late that I had missed a faint wrinkle near the collar. The moment he saw it, his expression hardened. "Minjun." His tone was sharp like the crack of a whip. "What is this?" I flinched, my hands twisting together. I'm sorry. I didn't notice." "You didn't notice?" He held the shirt up between two fingers as though it were a contaminated rag. "Do you know how important this meeting is? How I'll look standing in front of executives with this?" Shame burned through me. I bowed my head, voice trembling. "I'll fix it right away. I promise." His sigh was heavy, laced with disappointment. "You're so careless sometimes." The words lodged deep in my chest. I told myself it was just stress. That anyone in his position would be upset. That it wasn't really his fault. That night he didn't touch me. Didn't kiss me goodnight. He simply turned his back and fell asleep, while I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, silently vowing to do better. Days passed and his criticisms grew. "You're too quiet around my friends. They probably think you're boring. Why do you eat so slowly? It's embarrassing. Your cooking is mediocre at best. Maybe stick to ordering takeout." Each comment was said with an air of casual authority, like he wasn't insulting me but educating me. Like I should be grateful he was pointing out my flaws. And I believed him. Because I loved him. Or at least, I loved who I thought he was. So I folded myself smaller, tried to laugh more when his friends made jokes I didn't understand, practiced recipes late into the night just to impress him. I thought if I could be perfect he would look at me the way he did on our first date. But the more I tried, the less I seemed to satisfy him. The first shove came on a rainy Saturday. We had planned a weekend trip to the coast. Something simple, just us, away from the noise of the city. I had spent the whole week daydreaming about it, imagining us walking along the beach, maybe even holding hands like a real couple in love. But on Saturday morning as I packed a small bag, Sung-woo walked in, already dressed in a sharp suit. "I can't go," he said flatly, not even meeting my eyes. My heart sank. "But, we planned this. Don't you remember? I have work." "You've been working so much lately," I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady. "I thought this trip would help you relax. Don't you want to spend time together?" He froze, then turned slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Are you questioning me?" Fear prickled along my skin. "And no, I just..." Before I could finish, his hand shot out and shoved me back against the wall. The breath whooshed from my lungs as my shoulder hit the plaster. He loomed over me, his grip suddenly on my chin, fingers digging painfully as he forced me to meet his gaze. "You're suffocating me, Minjun," he hissed, his breath hot and bitter with coffee. "Do you understand? I don't need some weak omega whining about vacations when I'm building a future." Tears burned in my eyes. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean..." His hold tightened once, hard enough to make my jaw ache, then released me with a disgusted noise. He grabbed his briefcase and stormed out, leaving the door slamming in his wake. I slid to the floor, clutching my throbbing chin, my whole body trembling. It was the first time he had used his strength against me, and yet, I told myself it was an accident. That he hadn't meant it. That I had pushed too hard, said the wrong thing. Because the alternative, the thought that he might choose to hurt me, was too terrifying to accept. That night, I locked myself in the bathroom, curling up on the cold tile floor. My reflection in the mirror was pale, my lips trembling as I whispered apologies to no one. It's my fault. I shouldn't have pressured him. He's just stressed. He still loves me. He has to. I wore long sleeves the next day, even though it was humid and warm outside. The faint bruises on my chin ached whenever I smiled, so I didn't smile much. When Ji-hai called to check in, I lied. Everything's fine, I told her, forcing cheer into my voice. Sung-woo's just busy, that's all. Because if I admitted the truth, then I'd have to face it. And I wasn't ready. For weeks, I lived in that fragile balance. Moments of tenderness sprinkled among storms of criticism and silence. Sung-woo would sometimes pull me close, kiss me with passion that made me forget the pain, whisper promises of a future that seemed so bright in those fleeting seconds. And I clung to those moments like a drowning man to driftwood. But deep down, somewhere I tried not to acknowledge, I knew. The cracks had already begun to show. And love, if this was really love, shouldn't hurt like this. They say cages are built of iron and bars. But mine was built of words. Every insult, every criticism, every sharp sigh of disappointment, I swallowed them whole until they lined my throat, heavy, choking, silencing me. And the worst part was, I let them. At first, it was just his words. You're weak. You're too quiet. Do you really think you're good enough for me? Then it was his hands. The shove against the wall. The grip on my chin. The bruises he left like dark fingerprints on my skin, evidence I scrubbed away with sleeves and scarves. But it was the silence that killed me the most. Those nights when he came home late, reeking of whiskey and smoke, tossing his jacket onto the couch without even glancing at me. Those mornings when he ate breakfast in silence, scrolling through his phone as though I wasn't even there. I became invisible in my own life. I tried to hold on to the good moments, the rare times when he smiled at me, when he kissed me hard and fast like he couldn't get enough, when he whispered promises I was foolish enough to believe. One night, after a particularly rough argument, he pulled me close in bed and murmured against my ear, "You're mine, Min-jun. Don't ever forget that." And my heart, fragile and desperate, clung to those words. Because at least it meant I mattered to him. Didn't it? But the bruises spread. My body was a canvas of his moods, yellow fading to green on my arms, purple blooming on my ribs, faint red marks on my wrists where his grip had been too tight. I wore long sleeves in summer, buttoned up to my throat, sweat soaking through my clothes as I told my coworkers I was just sensitive to the sun. Ji-hai noticed. Of course she did. She always noticed. One afternoon, she pulled me aside after class, her eyes narrowing as she tugged lightly at my sleeve. "What's this, Min-jun?" I jerked back, heart hammering. "It's nothing. I just bumped into a shelf at work." Her frown deepened. "That's the third time this month you've bumped into something." I forced a laugh, brittle and hollow. "I guess I'm clumsy." She didn't look convinced, but I changed the subject quickly, babbling about assignments and the new cafe opening down the street. Anything to keep her from prying further. Because if I told her the truth, if I said the words out loud, "Sung-woo hurts me," then I'd have to face the reality I wasn't ready for. That the man I thought was my forever, was my prison. The cage tightened when he isolated me. "You don't need to see your friends so much," he said one evening, his arm draped casually over the couch. "They'll just fill your head with nonsense." "But Ji-hai, she doesn't like me, does she?" His eyes were sharp, daring me to disagree. I hesitated. "She just worries." "Then let her worry. You don't need her." His hand closed around mine, firm, possessive. "You need me. Only me." The way he said it, so certain, so absolute, made something inside me shrink. I nodded because arguing only ever led to pain. And slowly I stopped answering Ji-hai's calls as often. Stopped going out for coffee with classmates. Stopped existing outside the narrow world Sung-woo had built around me. The breaking point came one night when I made a mistake. It was small. Stupid. I had forgotten to refill the ice tray in the freezer. When he reached for it, ready to pour himself a glass of whiskey, he found it empty. He turned, eyes narrowing, jaw tightening. "Didn't I tell you to keep this filled?" I froze, words tangling on my tongue. I forgot. "I'm sorry, Al." The slap came fast, stinging across my cheek, the sound echoing in the kitchen like a gunshot. My breath caught, tears springing instantly to my eyes. I touched my face in shock, my skin burning under my fingertips. "You're useless," he spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "Can't even handle the simplest tasks." And then he left, slamming the door behind him, leaving me crumpled on the kitchen floor. I stayed there for hours, the cold tiles pressing against my legs, my sobs echoing in the emptiness of the apartment. That was the night something inside me cracked. Because love, real love, wasn't supposed to hurt like this. The next morning, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at my swollen cheek. For the first time, I didn't try to cover it up. I didn't reach for makeup or scarves. I just stared at the reflection of a boy who had once believed in happy endings, who had once believed he was lucky to be chosen, who now looked like a ghost, hollow-eyed, trembling, trapped. And I whispered to that reflection, voice hoarse and broken, "You need to get out." But even as I said it, fear coiled around my chest. Because leaving Sungwoo didn't feel like freedom. It felt like jumping from a cage into the unknown. And yet, deep down, I knew, if I stayed, there might not be anything left of me to save. The night I left Sungwoo, I didn't plan it. There was no suitcase by the door, no secret savings tucked into an envelope. Only desperation. Only the sound of my own heartbeat pounding louder than the storm outside. He had been drinking again, his footsteps unsteady as he prowled through the apartment like a predator. I could smell the whiskey before he even opened his mouth, hear the sharpness in his voice before he spoke. "Min Jun," he called, irritation lacing my name like a curse. I froze in the kitchen, my hands still damp from washing dishes. "Where's my tie?" I hung it by the door," I whispered, praying he wouldn't come closer. But he did. His eyes were glassy, his jaw tight. He found the tie exactly where I'd said, yanked it from the hook and tossed it onto the floor. "Why do you always make me ask twice? Do you enjoy seeing me angry?" I shook my head quickly, too afraid to breathe. He laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "You're pathetic." The word hit harder than any slap. Something in me snapped then, quiet and fragile like glass under pressure. I couldn't stay. Not another night. Not another second. The moment he staggered into the bedroom, I moved. My hands shook violently as I shoved clothes into a backpack. Shirts, trousers, nothing folded, nothing neat. I grabbed my wallet, my phone, the book I had been reading to escape the loneliness of his shadow. And then I opened the door. The rain greeted me like an old friend, cold and relentless, soaking through my clothes instantly. My feet carried me down the street before I could change my mind, my breath ragged, my heart screaming in my ears. I didn't look back. The city at night felt foreign, almost hostile. Neon lights bled into puddles on the pavement, cars hissed past, umbrellas bobbed in the distance. I had nowhere to go. Jihai's name hovered on my phone screen, my thumb trembling over the call button. But I couldn't press it. Not yet. Not when I was drenched, shaking, my cheeks still faintly swollen from the last time he'd struck me. I didn't want her to see me like this. So I walked. Aimlessly. Down streets I didn't recognize, past storefronts that glowed warm and inviting while I stayed out in the cold. My body ached, my legs begged me to stop, but fear kept pushing me forward. What if Sungwoo woke up and realized I was gone? What if he came after me? The thought made me stumble faster, my chest tightening. That's when I saw it. A bookstore. The kind that looked like it belonged in another time, wooden shelves visible through fogged windows, the faint glow of lamps spilling onto the wet pavement. A small bell hung above the door, swaying gently in the breeze. I don't know why, but I stepped inside. Warmth wrapped around me instantly, the scent of paper and ink soothing my raw nerves. The bell chimed softly, announcing my arrival. I thought the store was empty at first. Rows of books stretched into the dim interior, their spines gleaming under golden light. My shoulders relaxed slightly as I wandered between them, fingertips brushing the covers. And then I heard a voice. "Rough night?" I spun around, my breath catching. He stood at the end of the aisle, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed not in a suit but in a simple dark sweater and slacks. His presence was undeniable, the kind of quiet authority that filled the room without needing to be loud. His hair fell slightly over his forehead and his eyes, deep, steady, unwavering, locked onto mine. For a terrifying moment I thought he was another alpha like Sungwoo. That he would sneer, mock, demand something of me. My hands clenched into fists, my body instinctively retreating a step. But his expression softened. "I didn't mean to scare you," he said, his voice low, calm, like velvet against a storm. "The shop's about to close, but you can stay a little longer if you need to." I opened my mouth but no words came. My throat was tight, my mind a blur of fear and exhaustion. He didn't push. Instead he walked closer, slow and deliberate, like someone approaching a wounded animal. When he stopped a respectful distance away, he tilted his head slightly, studying me, not with judgment but with concern. "You're soaked," he murmured. "Do you need a towel?" Something inside me cracked at the gentleness in his tone. Tears welled in my eyes before I could stop them, blurring his face into soft shapes. I shook my head quickly, ashamed. He didn't comment. He just reached into the counter drawer, pulled out a clean cloth and set it gently on the table between us. Not pushing it into my hands. Not demanding. Just offering. I stared at it, my vision swimming. "Why?" I croaked finally, my voice hoarse. His brows knit slightly. "Why what? Why are you being kind?" The words tumbled out before I could stop them. You don't know me. For a long moment, silence hung between us. He looked at me, his gaze steady, unflinching, and then he said quietly, "Because you look like someone who hasn't been shown kindness in a long time." My chest tightened painfully. I wanted to deny it, to laugh, to brush it off. But instead I broke. The sob ripped from me raw and uncontrollable. I pressed my hands to my face, shaking as the weight of weeks, months, crashed down all at once. Shame, fear, exhaustion, grief, it poured out in choked gasps. I expected him to recoil, to scold me, to leave me there, pathetic and broken. But instead I felt warmth. A coat draped over my shoulders. A steady hand resting near mine, not touching, not yet, but close enough to remind me I wasn't alone. "Let me heal you, Min Jun," he said softly, like a promise. I froze. He knew my name. When I finally looked up, he was watching me with those steady, enigmatic eyes. "My name is Song Kang," he introduced himself, his voice gentle but strong. "And you don't have to tell me anything tonight. But I hope you'll let me help you." I wanted to run. My instincts screamed at me to flee, to never trust another Alpha again. My scars were too fresh, my heart too fragile. But something in his gaze rooted me to the spot. Not dominance, not contempt, not pity, just warmth. And for the first time in months I let myself breathe. When I woke the next morning, sunlight filtered weakly through cream curtains I didn't recognize. For a moment, panic surged through me. The unfamiliar ceiling, the soft bedding, the faint smell of cedarwood. Where was I? Then it came back in pieces. The bookstore, the rain, the tall man with the steady eyes. His name. Song Kang. And then the truth, I had fallen asleep here in the small guest room tucked behind his shop. I sat up quickly, clutching the blanket to my chest, my heartbeat uneven. Every part of me screamed danger. I had left Sung Woo, yes, but what if this was no different? What if I had simply traded one Alpha for another? My hands trembled as I pushed the blanket away. I had to leave. No. Before I got trapped again. The floor was cool under my feet as I slipped on my damp shoes. My bag was by the nightstand, half open, clothes spilling out from last night's frantic escape. I grabbed it, hugging it tightly, and moved toward the door as quietly as I could. But when I opened it, the smell of coffee hit me instantly. And there he was. Song Kang sat at the small table by the counter, a book open in one hand, a mug of coffee in the other. Morning light softened the sharpness of his features, making him look almost unreal, like a painting come alive. He looked up the moment he heard the door creak. His eyes met mine, and for an instant, I froze in place like a rabbit caught in the open. "You're awake," he said simply, his tone calm, unhurried. I clutched my bag tighter. I was just leaving. He didn't stand. He didn't block the door. He just closed his book gently and set his mug down. "You can," he said after a pause. "If that's what you want." The words disarmed me. No Alpha I had ever known gave permission so freely, so easily. It made me falter, my grip on the strap loosening slightly. "Why did you let me stay here?" My voice was hoarse, defensive, as if I needed to justify my presence. His gaze softened, though it never wavered. "Because you looked like you needed somewhere safe." Safe. The word twisted in my chest, unfamiliar and almost painful. I swallowed hard. "There's no such thing." "Maybe not for you yet," he admitted, his voice steady, low. "But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist." I didn't answer. My throat was too tight. He stood then, moving toward the counter with slow, deliberate steps. My body tensed instinctively, ready for the sharp tone, the rough hand, the blow that always followed Sung Woo's movements. But none came. Instead, Song Kang poured a second cup of coffee and placed it on the table nearest to me. His movements were precise, quiet, unthreatening. "You don't have to drink it," he said. "But it's here if you want it." I stared at the steam rising from the cup, the dark liquid rippling slightly. It smelled rich, bitter, grounding. I wanted to sit. My body ached for warmth, for rest, for something as ordinary as a shared morning. But my heart screamed that it was a trap, that if I let my guard down I'd pay the price. He didn't pressure me. He simply returned to his seat, sipping his own coffee as if my decision didn't matter to him at all. That indifference should have stung. Instead, it eased the tightness in my chest. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the faint hum of the city waking outside. Finally, almost against my will, I lowered my bag and sat. The chair creaked softly beneath me. My hands curled around the warm cup. The heat seeped into my cold fingers, chasing away the chill that had lived in my bones since the night I ran. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice so soft I wasn't sure he heard. But his lips curved into the faintest smile. "You're welcome." Days passed like that. I didn't leave. At first because I had nowhere else to go. Later, because I didn't want to. The bookstore became my sanctuary. The shelves, the quiet, the soft lamplight, it all felt like a shield between me and the world. Song Kang never pushed me, never demanded explanations. He let me exist in silence, and somehow, that silence began to heal me. Sometimes I caught him watching me, not with hunger or disdain, but with something I couldn't name. Respect maybe. Patience. Something steady enough to anchor me when I felt like drifting apart. And slowly, unbearably slowly, I began to trust him. One evening, as rain pattered softly outside, he found me curled up in the corner with a book half open on my lap. My eyes weren't on the pages, they were on the storm. "You're somewhere else again?" he said gently, leaning against the doorway. I startled, my body stiffening. I'm fine. But my voice cracked, betraying me. He didn't push. He crossed the room quietly and sat on the armchair opposite mine. For a moment he said nothing, just watching the rain with me. Then, "Do you want to talk about him?" The question sliced through me. I shook my head quickly, my hands clutching the book so tightly the cover bent. "No. Please, don't make me." His expression softened, though pain flickered briefly in his eyes. "I won't. Not until you're ready." The relief that flooded me was sharp, overwhelming. My chest ached with it. "Why?" I asked after a long silence. "Why are you so kind to me?" He turned to me then, and his gaze was unwavering, steady as the earth. "Because I see the strength you don't realize you have." Tears welled in my eyes, unbidden. I shook my head fiercely. "I'm not strong. I'm weak." That's what he always said. That's what everyone sees. Song Kang leaned forward, his voice firm but gentle. "Min Jun, surviving what you went through, that's not weakness. That's strength. The strongest kind there is." The words hit me harder than any insult Sung Woo had ever thrown. My breath came in shallow gasps, my chest tight. And then he reached out, slowly, carefully, and brushed a tear from my cheek with the back of his knuckle. I flinched instinctively, but his touch was feather-light, gentle. Not demanding, not possessive. Just there. "Let me heal you," he whispered, the same words he had said the night we met. My heart thundered. My walls screamed at me to stay close, to stay safe. But something deep inside me, something small and desperate, leaned toward him. "I'm scared," I confessed, my voice breaking. "I know," he murmured. "And that's why I'll go as slow as you need me to." Our eyes locked, the air between us heavy, electric. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel hunted. I didn't feel trapped. I felt seen. The kiss didn't happen that night. Not yet. But the promise of it lingered in the air, fragile and inevitable, like the first bloom of spring after a brutal winter. And for the first time since I had met Sung Woo, I let myself believe in the possibility of happiness again. The rain had finally stopped. For weeks, it had felt like the city was drowning with me, gray skies pressing down every morning, storms echoing the turmoil in my chest. But tonight the clouds broke and the air smelled clean, washed free. I sat by the bookstore window, my chin resting on my knees, watching droplets glitter on the glass. The shop was closed, the shelves quiet, the only sound the faint clinking of porcelain as Song Kang made tea behind the counter. It had become our routine. He brewed tea at night, I pretended to read but mostly stared out the window, and silence stretched between us, comfortable, never forced. But tonight silence felt heavy. Different. My chest was tight. My skin tingled with restless energy. Every time he moved in my periphery I felt it. His presence. His warmth. His steady, grounding aura that wrapped around me without suffocating me. I hated how much I wanted it. I hated how much I wanted him. "Chamomile," his voice broke my spiraling thoughts. He set a cup gently on the small table beside me. "Helps with sleep." "Thank you," I whispered, fingers curling around the warm porcelain. He sat across from me, his own cup untouched. His eyes lingered on me, not demanding, not consuming, just quietly watching. I shifted under the weight of it. "What?" He leaned back slightly, his lips curving in the faintest smile. "You look lighter tonight." "Lighter?" I echoed. "As if a little of the weight you carry isn't crushing you right now." I looked away quickly, embarrassed. Don't say things like that." "Why not?" His voice was soft, curious. "Because it feels like you see too much." "Maybe I do," he admitted. "But only what you allow me to." The words made my throat ache. I wanted to deny them, to retreat behind the walls I had lived inside for so long. But when I glanced up, his eyes met mine, steady, calm, patient. No force. No judgment. Just truth. I set the cup down before my hands could betray me with their trembling. My voice cracked when I spoke. "I don't know if I can do this." His brow furrowed slightly. "Do what?" "Be close to someone again." My chest burned as the confession tumbled out. Every time you look at me, every time you say something kind, I want to believe it. But then I hear his voice in my head. I feel his hands. I remember everything. The words choked me. Shame curled hot and heavy in my gut. Song Kang didn't move for a long moment. Then he set his tea aside and leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his gaze never leaving me. Min Jun, he said quietly, you don't owe me anything. Not your trust, not your body, not even your company. If you decide you never want more than tea and silence, I'll accept that. My breath caught. Then why are you still here? His lips curved into a small, almost wistful smile. Because I want to be. Something inside me cracked. The dam I had built with fear and shame crumbled under the weight of his words. Tears stung my eyes before I could stop them, blurring his face into soft, unbearable kindness. I pressed my hands to my mouth trying to muffle the sob, but he was already moving, slow, careful. He knelt in front of me, not touching, not crowding, just close enough that I could feel the heat of him. Let me heal you, he whispered again, the same words he had spoken that first night. This time I didn't flinch. This time I leaned forward, closing the gap between us and pressed my lips to his. The kiss was nothing like I remembered. With Sung Woo, kisses had been claims, harsh, bruising, a reminder of what I owed. With Song Kang it was a question. Gentle, hesitant, waiting for my answer. My body trembled, every nerve on fire. But instead of recoiling, I found myself leaning into him, my fists clutching the fabric of his sweater like an anchor. His lips were soft, warm, unhurried, moving against mine as if I had all the time in the world to decide. When he finally pulled back, just slightly, his forehead rested against mine. His voice was low, rough with restraint. Is this okay? I couldn't speak. My chest was too tight, my eyes too wet. But I nodded, small and desperate, and his breath left him in a sigh that was almost a prayer. We didn't rush. That night the kiss was enough. More than enough. I fell asleep on the couch, curled against his shoulder, his arm draped loosely around me like a shield. For the first time in months, maybe years, I slept without waking in terror. And while I found peace somewhere else in the city, Sung Woo's world began to crack. He slammed a glass against the bar counter, the shatter echoing through the empty lounge. His friends, no, his followers, watched uneasily as his new girlfriend draped herself over another man's lap. She didn't even try to hide it. Don't look at me like that, Sung Woo, she sneered, her lipstick smudged. You're not half the alpha you think you are. His fists tightened, rage boiling in his chest. But the eyes of his peers, once filled with admiration and fear, now glittered with ridicule. His grip on power, on influence, on control, was slipping. And in the quiet of a bookstore, I slept peacefully in the arms of someone who saw me, not as a possession but as a person. Spring crept into the city quietly. The streets that had been gray and wet for weeks slowly bloomed with cherry blossoms. Pink petals clung to sidewalks, danced across car hoods and clung to damp shoes. Each morning I woke to the faint scent of them drifting through the bookstore's open window, delicate reminders that seasons, even hearts, could change. I wasn't the same Min Jun who had stepped into this shop, dripping wet and trembling. My reflection still startled me sometimes, but for different reasons. My cheeks had color again. My eyes, though cautious, no longer looked hollow. And the reason was sitting across from me now. Song Kang. He was reading, as always, a novel held in one hand, his other hand resting loosely on the table between us. His presence was steady, grounding, like the heartbeat of the bookstore itself. I should have been used to it by now. But every time his gaze flicked up and caught mine, I felt my stomach flip, warmth blooming in my chest. And every time he smiled, we had kissed again. And again. Not rushed, not stolen, but offered like gifts, each one gentler than the last and yet somehow more consuming. I was still terrified sometimes, still flinched at sudden noises or unexpected touches. But Song Kang always paused, always asked, always waited until I leaned forward first. It wasn't passion that frightened me anymore. It was the possibility of losing this tenderness, of losing him. Min Jun. His voice pulled me back to the present. I blinked. Oh? You're staring. His lips curved into a teasing smile. Heat rushed to my cheeks. I wasn't. He arched a brow, amusement glinting in his dark eyes. Do you want to tell me what you were thinking? My gaze dropped to the table, to my hands twisting in my lap. That you're too good to be true. The air between us softened instantly. He set his book aside, leaning forward until his hand covered mine, warm, steady, patient. Min Jun, he said quietly, I'm not perfect. But I promise you what I feel for you is real. My chest tightened, my eyes stinging. His thumb brushed lightly against my skin, grounding me. And before I could stop myself, I whispered, Then don't leave me. His hand tightened around mine. His gaze was unwavering, solemn. Never. We began to build something like a life together. I helped around the shop, arranging shelves, wiping counters, even recommending books to customers when my confidence allowed. Song Kang cooked dinners in the small apartment upstairs, simple meals that filled the space with warmth and laughter. One night after dinner he coaxed me outside. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom, the streets glowing under soft lanterns strung between buildings. The sight stole my breath. I hadn't been outside in weeks without fear pressing against my ribs. But with him at my side my steps felt steadier. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he murmured, glancing at the trees. I nodded, but my eyes weren't on the blossoms. They were on him. Maybe he felt it because he turned, his lips curving in that way that always undid me. "You're staring again." This time I didn't look away. "I don't care." Something flickered in his gaze, something warmer, deeper. He reached up, brushing a stray petal from my hair, and the touch lingered. I swallowed hard, my chest tight. "Song Kang." "Yes." The words tangled in my throat. "I love you." They pressed against my lips, desperate to escape. But fear clamped down, reminding me of promises once whispered and broken. He seemed to understand. He leaned down, his lips brushing mine softly, reverently. Not asking. Not demanding. Just giving. And in the glow of falling blossoms I kissed him back. While I was learning to bloom again, Sungwoo was burning. The fall was swift, merciless. His girlfriend, No, his latest conquest, had emptied his accounts and disappeared. His business partners began to withdraw, whispers spreading about his temper, his recklessness, his weakness. The same alphas who once bowed to him now laughed behind his back. He stumbled through bars, through empty apartments, through nights filled with regret and fury. And when he thought of me, pathetic, weak, fragile Min-jun, the bile rose in his throat. Because the image that haunted him wasn't the one he left broken. It was the one he couldn't stop imagining. Me smiling in someone else's arms. The thought consumed him. One evening as I closed the shop's shutters I felt it, the faint prickle at the back of my neck. The sense of being watched. I turned, my heart stuttering. The street was quiet, the blossoms still drifting in the breeze. But far down the road just for a moment I thought I saw a shadow linger. "Min-jun?" Song Kang's voice called from inside. I forced a smile when I turned back. "Coming." But my hands shook slightly as I locked the door. Because even though my heart was healing, I knew my past wasn't finished with me yet. The bookstore had become my home. Its wooden shelves and soft lamplight, its smell of paper and tea leaves, the quiet hum of Song Kang moving through the aisles, all of it was a balm I never thought I'd find. The broken pieces of me fit here, slowly knitting together in the warmth of his steady presence. But the past is stubborn. Shadows have long memories. And Sungwoo was a shadow that refused to disappear. It happened one evening. The air was thick with the perfume of cherry blossoms, petals gathering in small drifts outside the door. Song Kang and I had just finished closing up. He was upstairs preparing dinner, humming under his breath, when a sharp knock rattled the shop's door. I froze. Something in the sound, too harsh, too desperate, sent a cold spike of fear down my spine. My breath stuttered, my fingers curling tightly into my sleeves. The knock came again, louder this time. And then a voice. "Min-jun. I know you're in there." My blood ran cold. "Sungwoo." I backed away from the door, my heart hammering. Memories crashed over me, his sneer, his fists, his voice dripping with contempt. My body trembled as if I were right back in that apartment, trapped under his shadow. The door rattled as he shoved it. "Open the door. We need to talk." I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My chest tightened painfully, the edges of my vision blurring. Then a warm hand settled on my shoulder. "Min-jun." I turned, my eyes wide, to find Song Kang beside me. His gaze was calm, steady, but underneath it I saw the storm, the barely restrained fury at seeing me like this. "I'll handle it," he said firmly. "No," my voice cracked. "He'll hurt you. Not a chance." His hand squeezed mine, grounding me. "You're safe. Trust me." And for the first time in my life I did. Song Kang unlocked the door and stepped outside. I stayed just behind him, clutching the frame like it was the only thing keeping me upright. Sungwoo stood on the sidewalk, disheveled and wild-eyed. His once perfectly styled hair was messy, his expensive jacket wrinkled, his lips twisted in a sneer that barely concealed desperation. The sight of him stole my breath. Not because he was powerful anymore, but because he wasn't. He looked small. "Min-jun," he spat, his eyes flicking to me over Song Kang's shoulder. "You think you can just run away from me? From us?" "There was no us," I whispered, my voice shaking but audible. "There never was." His face twisted, fury and disbelief mingling. Don't you dare, after everything I gave you? Everything? My chest burned, words spilling out before fear could silence me. You gave me nothing but pain. Bruises. Scars. Nights I thought I wouldn't survive. You never loved me, Sungwoo. You hated me for what I am. His jaw clenched. You're mine. You'll always be mine. That was when Song Kang stepped forward, his voice like steel. No, he's not yours. Not now. Not ever. Sungwoo's sneer faltered. And who the hell are you? Song Kang's gaze was unflinching, his presence towering even without raising his voice. Someone who loves him. Someone who will protect him. Something you could never be. The street was quiet, save for the rustle of petals drifting on the breeze. Sungwoo's fists clenched at his sides, his chest heaving. For a moment I thought he might lunge. But the fire in his eyes wasn't strength, it was desperation. And desperation is powerless. You'll regret this, Minjun, he hissed finally, his voice cracking. You'll regret leaving me. But even as he said it, I could see the truth. He was already the one drowning in regret. He turned sharply and stormed down the street, his figure shrinking until it was nothing more than another shadow among the trees. The silence that followed was deafening. My body trembled so violently I thought I'd collapse. But then Song Kang was there, pulling me gently into his arms, holding me against his chest. It's over, he murmured, his voice low and steady. He can't touch you anymore. My hands clutched his shirt desperately, tears spilling hot and unrelenting. I was so afraid. I thought I'd never get away from him. You did, he said firmly, tipping my chin so I'd look into his eyes. His gaze was unwavering, burning with quiet certainty. You're free now, Minjun. Truly free. And something inside me, something twisted tight for so long, finally broke loose. That night, as cherry blossom petals drifted past the window, I sat curled against Song Kang on the couch. His arm was around me, his lips brushing the crown of my head. I don't deserve you, I whispered, my voice raw. He kissed my hair softly. You deserve the world. I lifted my face then, tears still streaking my cheeks. Song Kang. He looked at me, his gaze softening. Yes. The words trembled on my lips, fragile but true. I love you. For a heartbeat, silence. Then his eyes burned, his jaw tightening as if holding back an emotion too vast for words. And then he kissed me, deeply, desperately, like a promise. I love you too, Minjun, he whispered against my lips. More than you'll ever know. The days that followed were filled with peace. Laughter returned to my voice. Warmth filled my chest. The scars didn't vanish, but they no longer defined me. I was more than a victim. I was loved, cherished, free. And Sungwoo? Rumors spread quickly. His business collapsed, his so-called friends abandoned him, and the women he tried to use left him one by one. He became nothing more than a bitter echo of his former self. A warning, not a man. And I didn't think of him again. Because I had blossoms, books, laughter, and Song Kang. And that was all I ever needed.